What we have to start with, as always, and he's on the phone with us right now, is Ben Burgis. He is author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, and Moondug, I believe is the gentleman's name, Ed, who's a genius. He's the same guy that gave us the new Shout-Out song, has a new version. Ben, are you ready for the remix? The remix of your Debunk segment song? You ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
I want to go to mockery really bad.
I will.
So please go.
Okay.
You got to restrain me. You're going to show us how to argue that. Go.
Humiliation, shame, and ridicule are frequently used tools by Michael, as they are by many good leftists. But Professor Ben Burgis is here to mess with the logic and facts, so we can make a more sophisticated, convincing counterattack.
This is based on data from a bunch of different countries.
If you were not a beta male, you wouldn't be a leftist.
Ben, where does the logic come from?
Give them an argument.
What's the answer, Mr. Logic? Vic Vaiana, what did you think of that?
That's great. Yeah, and King Tubby will be proud.
Oh, sorry. Switch the button. Go to the bottom. There you go. And say it again.
Yeah, that's some great dub. I think
some
Anthony
great
Fontana
dub.
would love that, you know.
Okay, all right. So let's start. Okay, Ben Burgis, Mr. Logic, what do you think of your song? After that very low energy interest in it.
No, it's good.
You know, Ben, you're a brand ambassador for Logic here. Like, don't be that guy. Come on.
I'm doing my best. Speaking of Logic, by the way, I threw it out to everybody on Twitter a couple days ago to try to see if we could get the definitive answer about where Logic comes from.
Uh-huh.
And 1,210 people voted in the poll.
Wait, just to be clear, this is the infamous answer from Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson that you couldn't answer, where Logic comes from.
I know, because I'm so dumb, I don't even know what the question means. But
right.
Out of the 1,200 some people who participated in the poll, 10% went with the Matt Leck answer, the white man.
Mm-hmm.
17% said New Jersey. 29% said the balls, and a whopping 45% said Allah, praise be upon him.
Can I get a little bit of Islamic crawl to prayer, Matt? I believe I said that, and I would just like a little bit of the call to prayer as an acknowledgement of fucking nailing it. You ready for this, Ben?
Yeah.
Ready to understand? I actually really genuinely love the call to prayer. It's beautiful. It's totally beautiful.
Yeah.
It's also
the reverb.
It's beautiful. And you can go, like, if you're somewhere in the Middle East, you can actually everybody has different, quality depending on what mosque you're by, and you might find yourself in one that's really good. So anyways, after that excursion into the beauty and wonder of religion, let's get back to Logic, Ben.
Yeah, now you sound so excited.
I'm just kidding. Ben, this is honestly, this one, well, they always interest me, but I think this one is really important because it's actually getting, it's coming back into the public discourse in a way that's actually really disturbing. But we are talking about the neoliberal myth that education is the pathway out of poverty. And in order to do that, before we get to you, and you're going to explain what that myth is and debunk it, and then we'll get to the more modern stuff in a second. But first, we have a clip of Hillary Clinton from 1983. Is that 83 or 93?
Back when she was still faking a Southern accent in Arkansas.
Right. And then Barack Obama, and then one other. All right, this is Hillary Clinton.
State is somebody because we're going to give them every chance we can to develop their minds so that they can play a role in this state and this country to make it the kind of place it needs to be.
I think it's actually
You
I
weren't
think we
kidding.
actually just heard the second half of the clip. It's the first half is where she is probably going to be the more relevant one.
Oh, you have it? All right. We'll reset
road
that.
to being somebody in this society starts with education. And we intend to be sure that everybody in this room and every child in this state is somebody.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. And here's President Obama, 2010 State of the Union Address.
In the 21st century, the best anti-poverty program around is a world-class education.
Oh, God, that's embarrassing. All right. And now, actually, and Ben, I apologize. I've actually read this gentleman's book, but I do not know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, so I think Rajan, but I could be totally wrong.
Rajahan. Well, no, it is Rajan. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but anyway, scroll down.
All right. So
former Indian Central Bank governor. Is this a sound or?
no,
okay,
this
I'll just read it off a bit.
Yep.
Okay, former Indian Central Bank Governor Rajaharan Rajan has warned capitalism is under serious threat as it has stopped providing for the masses. When that happens, the many revolt against capitalism. This all so far sounds kind of good Keynesian stuff.
Sure.
Scroll down a bit. I think capitalism was under serious threat because it stopped providing for the many. This is okay. Now, if you really want to succeed, you really need a good education. Unfortunately, the very communities that are hit by the forces of global trade and global information tend to be communities that have deteriorating schools, give me one more scroll down, rising crime, rising social illness, and are unable to prepare their members for the global economy. So this is I won't read more of it, but this is very trendy speak several years ago of the sort of socially concerned brand of Davos, which is global trade's hitting people. Let's get them some education. Ben, explain this myth and why it doesn't work.
Yeah, so this is a nice cross section across time, right? We've got Hillary in 1983, we've got Obama in 2010, and this article with the former governor of the Indian Central Bank and possible future head of the IMF is from March of this year. Right. So this is one of those things that never dies, right? You know, these guys love this; they keep saying it, and we're looking at possibly also looking at some clips from Cory Booker and stuff like that. But I think this is nice and representative. And what you see, and you see it really clearly, because even like when I first posted on Twitter about this, like, hey, possibly going to talk about this on Debunk, kind of laid out the basic idea to people who have clips. There were even some people who I think, some of these are, TMBS fans, people with good politics, who are like, well, hold on, right? I mean, education does provide people economic opportunities, and that's true to a point. But the really important jump is the one that you get in those 12 seconds of Hillary Clinton in Arkansas in 1983, when she says, the road to being somebody in this society is get an education, and we're going to make sure that everybody can be a somebody, right? So, right. In other words, the starting point, the premise is that education can be useful for upward mobility, which to a point is true. It's exaggerated. We can talk about even in individual cases, there are lots of hindrances to upward mobility that, education doesn't necessarily do anything to stop. That, even in various individual cases, certainly in 2019, a college degree is not, even if you're, getting in something useful, not like philosophy, it's a college degree is not a passport, by itself into the middle class. That was a joke. Philosophy is great for lots of things, but even to the extent that this is true of individuals, you can't go from the possibility of individual upward mobility to this being a structural solution for poverty. When Obama says education is the best anti-poverty program around, right? He's talking about this larger social problem and saying that the solution is education. Hillary Clinton says that, okay, education makes you somebody, so everybody could be a somebody, right? Then this is exactly what we were talking about last week with Jesse Lee Peterson. And of course, Peterson, there's such an embarrassment of riches. It was so goofy. There's like so much to talk about there. I think the point almost got lost. But but it's the exact same problem as what Peterson was saying, which is, again, this is the composition fallacy. It's like saying that every molecule in the Brooklyn Bridge is invisible, therefore the Brooklyn Bridge is invisible. That even if it's true of every distinct individual, of course it's not true in many cases for lots of complicated reasons, but even if it were true of every particular individual, that they could become upwardly mobile through education and other things, it wouldn't follow from that everybody can be upwardly mobile at the same time. And in fact, this is something that you hear all the time, right? That in fact, especially post the 2016, like this used to be oftentimes something you'd hear from dismissive conservatives. Post the 2016 election, you hear it a lot from liberals who are talking about white people in Appalachia who think all voted for Trump, and they saying, well, look, instead of whining about deindustrialization, whatever, you should just like learn to code,
right?
But of course, if everybody learned to code, that wouldn't magically create more coding jobs. That would just severely devalue the price that being able to code could command in the labor market. And similarly, if everybody goes to college, which I absolutely think for totally separate reasons should be a goal that we have, everybody absolutely should be able to go to college. Because it's a valuable human experience to have, like a society worth living in. That's absolutely something everybody would be able to do. But if everybody, whatever kind of, just as a matter of, this isn't even some like esoteric Marxist point, just as a matter of your like incredibly pro-capitalist Econ 101 textbook, the first chapter where they talk about supply and demand, well, if you oversupply people with these degrees, the economic value decreases, right? The more people who go to college, the less individual economic advantage going to college gives you. So this idea that this is a solution to structural poverty is absolutely asinine, right? We should support universal college education because it's a human good that everybody should be able to experience. But there's nothing, but like not because it's going to give people individual advantage. In fact, the more people who do it, the less individual advantage that gives it. And so what it really shows is the total emptiness of their program, that because, these, in most of the cases we've been talking about, these neoliberal Democrats who say things like this, because they have no larger program for what to do about poverty, they're not, because of the constraints of their politics, they can't even in a partial social democratic way, they can't actually challenge the economic structure. So what they're left with is, well, what can we do without disturbing market forces? Well, we could, encourage education or maybe fund education more, which would be great, right? Or in this sort of most debased version of this, fund charter schools, which is not so great. But regardless, what it really shows is their desperation, because it should take 10 seconds of thought to show that no amount of education, no amount of training can change structural poverty and can't change the conditions of the people at the bottom. And somebody's got to be at the bottom. That it's just structurally impossible.
And so just
to have an economy. Yeah.
Just briefly, I do want to touch on that, right? Because I noticed also when you tweeted this out, and now there's like this, well, they're not merry, but they're a band of Yang irritants who love Andrew Yang and are quite obsessed with us. And Matt, when you have a chance, so you put this out, and of course, and it's amazing. Like they have this epistemic. Like, look, everybody knows I'm a 100,000% supporter of Bernie Sanders, and and everybody knows how strongly I feel about Lula. I will just do a pro tip for the Yang people. I don't go into every mention and say like Lula agreed with that. Oh, so all of a sudden you're saying what Lula said? But nonetheless, they do this for every single thing, and and so they said, well, Andrew Yang agrees that education isn't going to save us, and then they do their automation thing. But can you explain why? Just because that if in the center is the neoliberal lie and mythology that education can solve poverty, which you just explained it can't, then there's it can't solve poverty, so fuck it, let's not do anything about it. And then there's the more of our vision, and it's expressed to a real extent in Sanders' vision, which is that education's an innate value, and in a democracy and in a real society, we should support it for everybody as its own innate goal outside of the market.
Yeah, I mean, actually, as I was thinking about that, you'll like this. I was thinking about an old Zen parable I remember hearing about somebody who has achieved enlightenment, and they asked him what he did before he achieved enlightenment. He said, I carried water from the river, and they said, well, what do you do after you achieved enlightenment? He said, I carried water from the river, right? That, and I always used to think that was kind of reactionary, because you're just telling people to be content with their bad circumstances. But I think there's another way to read it, which is that not all of life is about what you do, right?
Right.
And so this can be an incredibly enriching, you can have experiences that are incredibly enriching, and then doesn't necessarily change what your career path is, right? Which is why we want to change what the conditions are for people who do the socially necessary labor at the bottom of society, right? You're like, if everybody no longer did manual labor, then we'd starve to death because nobody grows the food. Somebody has to do that. What we want to do is make life better for those people. And that gets back to the Yang vision and the contrast with Yang. Because, of course, the germ of truth in this person in the Yang brigades who is latching onto this complain, well, Andrew Yang said that. Well, okay, first of all, Andrew Yang didn't quite say that, because Andrew Yang has a way of making this argument that really overemphasizes the robots that's not really empirically supported, but let's not even get into that, right? The important point is what you're highlighting, which is that, okay, sure, Yang is right as far as this goes when he says that education won't solve poverty, but the problem is that Yang doesn't say, therefore we need to look elsewhere. Yang says, well, therefore I guess we just can't, right? In other words, that if education isn't going to solve unemployment, for example, we just should stop trying to solve unemployment, and we should just default to just give up on that, and to make sure things don't completely collapse into chaos. We could hand out this miserly ration of a UBI check that'll be very vulnerable to inflation, and not a penny more, right? Not even for disability.
Increases.
Yeah, rent increases, of course. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which again, this is all like chapter one of that neoclassical economics Econ 101 book. This is stuff that we theoretically agree with them about, but they seem to forget about it in these contexts, supply and demand. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like the Yang vision is such an impoverished, it's just like, well, we'll have, we can't let these people get too desperate, because if they get too desperate, then they'll start rioting and burning things down, and it'll be bad for business, so we can't have that. So,
right.
We'll cut them a check, and then that's that, right? And even to the extent that you take the Yang worry seriously, this whole business about whether the robots are really coming for your jobs and everything, there's a very complicated argument to be had about that, because there's a long history of people making predictions about that didn't pan out.
Right.
But even to the extent that you do take it seriously, then you should just say, okay, well, then we really need to actually, if that's true, that gives us a reason to push even beyond the Bernie stuff, even beyond social democracy, and start looking at the economic structure of society, because the only reason that that robots taking over manual labor would be a bad thing would be because the machines are privately owned. So that means some people just lose their jobs and some people have to work as hard as ever. Whereas if we had the kind of society where, well, if we had workers' control, along the Mondragon model or things like this, then sure, great. This would be good news that there was manual labor that used to have to be done by humans that could now be done by machines, because then we could all just vote ourselves fewer hours for the same compensation and have more time to devote to everything that actually matters in life.
Right.
And that's really the point, right?
And that's really the point.
Because I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that guy's tweet. He was like, "Oh, you called Andrew Yang a defeatist, but he's just saying the same thing as you." It's like, no, motherfucker, he's not saying the same thing, right? He's saying a very different thing, And what he's saying really is defeatist, because instead of that vision we were just talking about, where people could work fewer hours a day, they could devote more time to everything that matters personally, spiritually, creatively in their lives. You're just saying, no, we'll just cut him a check and be done with it. Well, that is defeatist.
That's 100% right. And I just want to say, because again, I know that they get very upset about this stuff. I just want to say, just to put and we got to run in a second, but just to put their position on the table, so maybe this could save a few meltdowns. In their defense, they would say, in response to everything we're saying, from the rent issue to inflation to the defeatism, that Andrew Yang says it wouldn't. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just to be fair, because I get a lot of tweets and charts and Medium posts that pretty much amount to that from them. Anyways, Ben Burgis, the book is Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. It's an excellent, indispensable book. Order it now. Join Ben's Patreon. Ben and I had a great conversation about The Sopranos. Ben, thanks so much, man.
All right. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.